Hello and welcome to our spoilers review of The Martian. This is the special review where we actually talk about the movie and everything that happens in it. Mark over there and John had already done one on Movie Talk, but today we're going to talk about it like you've already seen the movie. So I want to introduce the people joining me today. Christian, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I'm so glad to be talking about this movie because we were hoping for a good Ridley Scott movie finally, and boy, did we get one.
And Mark Ellis joining us as well.
Yeah, I'm pumped to be talking about all the things I didn't like about The Martian as soon as I think of one.
So let's talk about our overall thoughts and what we liked about the movie, which for me, and I'm pretty sure for you guys, is a lot of stuff. Christian, let's start with you. What did you like about it, and what were your overall thoughts?
Well, the one thing I loved about it, which you could say for any of the Ridley Scott movies ever, and even the ones that you may not have liked recently, including The Counselor and including some people like Prometheus, is that it's beautiful. It is stunning to look at. The man knows how to shoot a movie, and Mark, you and I joked about this too. You actually think that they shot on Mars. Like it doesn't. If they used green screens, I couldn't tell where they were, and the location, whatever they used, it was such a good spot, which goes into filmmaking, and you could tell that Ridley Scott had a lot of effort. And when they brought him on, because he wasn't originally the person that was going to direct this movie, and because Matt Damon was already brought on. This novel, people were raving about it. What I really liked about the fact that this was a novel that hadn't even been published when they bought it and were going to make the movie out of it. And Simon Kinberg was part of this as well. The execution. So my long-winded response here is the execution of the movie and the way that it was put together by Scott, but the performance by Matt Damon. It takes a special actor to be able to pull off what Tom Hanks did in Castaway, and Tom Hanks did in Apollo 13, although he had a couple other actors with him. But this movie, he did it by himself. But I liked the interaction of how to get him home. It was one of these movies, like the marketing ploy of get him home was actually part of the movie. It was the main point of the movie of this guy surviving, but yet you had the Jeff Daniels character who could have been the mustache twirling villain, but he wasn't. He was a businessman. He maybe made some corporate decisions that you wouldn't have made, but who knows when you're put in that position. And I thought it was a real human story. And I really liked the dynamic of the team. I thought that it could have been, oh man, Interstellar 2 here, because you got Matt Damon, you got Jessica Chastain. I forgot that they were both in the movie because it was such a different movie, even though it was in space. And that was the thing. It didn't just feel like a space movie. The way that they portrayed Mars as this planet that we're eventually going to live on in the next 200-300 years. I really...
Is that happening?
Yeah.
I didn't get that phone call.
I wouldn't be surprised. They're finding water there. Who knows?
Set it in your calendar.
Matt Damon's there right now. But and it was the writing. It was the writing by Drew Goddard, which I thought it adapted the novel. I didn't read the novel, but what I heard, the humor in it, the humor really hit. That was one of the things I remember when we talked to Alicia Malone about the novel. She's like, it's amazing how funny it is. And it's funny. And I liked that it could have been dreary, and it wasn't. So those were some of the things that stood out to me.
If I was not mistaken, I think Drew Goddard was supposed to direct this movie, and then he ended up saying he was going to do Sinister 6, which as we know, is no longer happening, or at least not anytime soon. Mark, what did you think?
Well, I did read the book. And no, I didn't read the book, but the visuals were amazing. And going off your point about Ridley Scott, he always does visuals well, but here, even look at the stills from The Martian. You feel like it's a real environment, and you feel like you're on this distant planet with Matt Damon during those scenes. And when you're on Earth, you feel like you're one of the people in the boardroom that's talking about how do we get this guy home? How do we handle the media scrutiny that's going to be upon all of us? Or you feel like you're in the spaceship that's rocketing home. The emotion in this movie got me so much, but more than anything else, I felt like this was an event that had happened, and I was watching a historical film in the vein of something like an Apollo 13, where it felt so real to me that it never felt like a work of fiction. Every character was so relatable, and you could find something of yourself in these people. Matt Damon, when he's cracking jokes, and then 5 minutes later, he's going out of his mind with loneliness, with tears, with just shouting at the top of his lungs, angered at his position. This movie blew me away. I think maybe my favorite thing about the film is that the trailer didn't ruin it for me, and I whined about that. It did not.
Yeah.
I was bitching about this trailer gave away way too much. I still think that first trailer gave me a little more information than I needed, but it didn't spoil the movie at all. I had no idea what was going to happen. I was on the edge of my seat for a 2-hour and 20-minute movie that flew by.
Oh, I also love this movie. It's definitely going to be in my top 5 of the year, at least so far, until we see some other movies that come down the pipe. Yeah, Ridley Scott. I'm actually one of those people that like Prometheus.
I'm with you. Yeah.
I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it. But this definitely is his best, at least for me, his best movie since Black Hawk Down, which is a long time ago.
Yeah.
It was like 2001.
Yeah.
And speaking of how gorgeous it looks, yeah, he had the same cinematographer that he used for Prometheus. I think his name's like Darius Wooley. I can't pronounce his name, but
Guy's awesome.
Yeah, he does like even a movie I didn't like, Exodus. I visually looked fantastic, but the narrative. But here was something that he took Drew Goddard's script and he was able to channel kind of all the stuff that I felt was missing from Exodus, which was the emotion, characters you cared about, story, tension, like everything, all those things that I felt like maybe he had lost kind of. I didn't see The Counselor, but I guess I heard that also was kind of a big
There's a
mess
few
as
scenes that are visually stunning. But that's about all you got.
That's all you got.
The humor in it, unexpected, and I liked Matt Damon had put on a great performance. He didn't have to carry. I mean, he's the main character, but he didn't have to carry the movie like a Tom Hanks did in Castaway. We had all those other characters trying to help his character come home, and you're right about like it felt realistic. I think Andy Weir, the guy who wrote the novel, when they optioned the book for the movie, he brought in NASA to like help with the movie production so that they could do realistic stuff. There's a lot of things that people complain, or not, I don't know if they complain about, but might complain about, which is like the helmet. Remember when the helmet cracks?
Yeah.
And like he puts duct tape on it? I read somewhere that they said that it's possible for that to actually help and work out.
You know, that's an interesting point because you wonder if this movie is going to get gravitated a little. And what I mean by that is that people put holes in the science of it. Like I joked on Twitter that I'm so glad I didn't watch this movie next to Neil deGrasse Tyson because I don't want him telling me everything that's inaccurate about this. I'm sure not all this stuff could actually happen. I don't know how easy it is to grow potatoes on Mars. I'm sure it might be really hard if you're a botanist all by his lonesome, but you believe it. That's what this movie's job was, is to make me believe this is all actually happening. And I was so locked in. And you're right, Dennis. It wasn't just the performance of Matt Damon. Everybody back on Earth. We were talking on Movie Talk earlier about how who would get nominated for Best Actor, Best Supporting Actress, and stuff like that. There's a lot of potential candidates in this movie, not the least of which was Jeff Daniels.
Yeah,
because what you brought up, Christian, he wasn't just Snidely Whiplash. You could see emotion in there. You could see heart that he wanted to bring these people home, too. You look at Chiwetel Ejiofor or Sean Bean or Benedict Wong. There's a lot of candidates here that could be looking at a statue.
You know, going off you guys' point about it, fact checking, and if somebody was saying, well, that's not necessarily accurate, I don't always need a movie to be accurate all the time, as long as I believe it, and I believed it all the way through. And I even in the initial, the first thing that happens where he gets blown back, and you're like, well, he's dead. How is he going to survive that? And he somehow survives laying out for a few hours underneath the sand. You're like, well, he probably would die. We don't know. We don't know what the atmosphere is like there. I have no idea. But all I do know is that the tension was set up well enough to where I was like, okay, he survived, and now he's, like you said, growing potatoes, and he just blew himself up, and he's cracking jokes about it. He Richard Pryor'd it, you know. So like he was going through. He cracked jokes about it after he did that, and I liked the little video documentaries that he was making, like after he would screw up, and then we knew he screwed up, and we were like, oh no, he's gonna lose it, but he joked about it. And I thought that type of stuff, to where he was keeping himself sane. And then it's funny because I was thinking to myself the whole time, I'm like, well, he hasn't lost any weight, he looks fine. And then they did that one right before they rescued him at the end, and he looks like Christian Bale from The Machinist. Like his whole back, is you see the bones popping out. And I don't know if that was CGI or if Matt Damon really lost the weight. I have no idea.
I would hope it's CGI. I hope it's CGI.
Listen, I don't know, man, but the makeup and the way that they portrayed him at the end is just everything, and that the tension. You talk about the part that was in space when they send him up out there, you know, with basically nothing protecting him as he goes into space, and he's just circling around, and you feel it, like the tension is there. and I thought that was again, you got to give Ridley Scott credit for the way that he directed.
And since this is a spoilers review, we can actually talk about this. Is when they sent up that first rocket, and they wanted to rush it, so they didn't do every security check that they might have if they had a little more time to do this thing because they were so desperate, and it blows up. Like I was so emotionally affected by watching that. I'm like, oh, we're not going to get this guy home now. I was so sure he was getting home until that happened. How are we going to do this now? And watching the scientists just try to figure out a way to get this dude back to Earth, it was such an intense watch from start to finish.
But didn't you know that the crew was going to come back for him, though? I mean, they were setting that up.
That was something, though, I think kind of was spoiled in the trailers, though.
That they were coming back.
Yeah.
I think that you're absolutely right. I think that I still would have guessed it from the way that they set it up in the beginning, was that they were so devastated and they wouldn't tell the crew. They didn't tell the crew 3 months into it, and Sean Bean finally had to sneak some message to them. I loved all that stuff with the crew, that they were this tight-knit crew. And again, they could have went cliche, like there was one guy that had a problem with it, but there wasn't. They all want. I loved that scene with the crew where they're all like, yeah, let's go back and get him. There was a hesitation for maybe a second when they thought about their families, but it was gone.
But all their personalities showed, too.
Yeah,
so you got to see the way Michael Pena looks at the world, the way that Jessica Chastain views it. So I liked that they were still a diverse group of people, but with this mission, they might have had different reasons for wanting to go back and get him, but they all agreed on it pretty easily. I thought that worked for the movie because we didn't need another conflict.
Right.
Well, you mentioned that 2 hour and 20-minute long runtime. Yeah, it didn't feel slow at all. I mean, there was not nonstop action, but there was so much tension, like you said. So the pace of the movie kept moving. And talking about that end sequence, even though I said that Matt Damon didn't carry the movie on his shoulders like a Tom Hanks did, he did have this at the very end, this like emotional release as he's being lifted up, and I think that was great because you did have him cracking jokes and like being frustrated, being angry, celebrating his small victories in terms of survival. But in that last sequence, I mentioned this, I forgot when I mentioned this, but it reminded me of Tom Hanks in Captain Phillips at the very end.
Oh, yeah, right.
When he breaks down. It's like all that stuff that happened to him kind of gets released. And I was totally emotionally invested when he's going up there and, he's like, oh, you're going to, shoot him up in a convertible, which was like, come on, like he's going up into space. And they can't even cover the top of it.
You bring up that emotional level too. It shows you how invested you are. With all credit to Matt Damon, the scene when he grows the potatoes and he's really excited about it. You get excited with him, but when he loses the potatoes, in my head I'm going, "Wait, you can grow them back, right?" And like I was like, "Well, no, he's so screwed. He's got to find another way to do it." And the way that he that he scienced the shit out of it. That to me also was a line that was in one of the trailers. It still delivered. Wasn't, even though I knew it was coming, it was as funny because of what he did with his personality, and the science of it was, I thought, really smart.
If you're on a yearbook committee and you don't let somebody have that quote for their senior quote, especially somebody who wants to be a doctor, something like, I'm going to science the shit out of this, please let them put that in the yearbook. Get away with one swear word.
I also felt for him too, even before he lost his potatoes. When, remember, he was showing how he had to eat everything, and all he had was like potatoes and those MREs. Is that what they call them? And like he ran out of. Remember, he ran out of ketchup.
Oh, you're right. Yeah. The rations I thought was pretty great that they paid attention to that about how many rations he had and how he had to kind of mathematically figure it out. And then back at NASA, they were talking about how long he had with the food that he grew. I thought that, and I don't know how much of that was in the book. I assume a lot of it. It goes back to the writing. Like this was just a movie that you get and you go, okay, writing, directing, acting, everything just worked. And today on Movie Talk we had that question that came in about original material, and this is an original story. I mean, it was based on this book, but it's still, that book was an original story that made this movie, and this is one of those refreshing movies.
Yeah, and like you said, everything got executed well from every standpoint, the writing, directing, performing, and it all comes together, which we haven't always seen from recent Ridley Scott movies. So let's move on to the things that we didn't like. I'm sure there's a few small things. Mark, anything that stood out to you?
I might be the wrong guy to kick off this part of the discussion because I'm having trouble racking my brain thinking about anything. Either things that bug me or actually a credit to the movie is that I couldn't go pee during this movie because there's never a scene that I wanted to leave. I actually saw people in our theater that had to get up and go pee, and God love you if you had to, but then while they're out there for that minute, something happened, And I'm like, oh man, they got to ask whoever they're sitting next to about this because you can't miss that. When he runs out of ketchup, I'm like, damn it, that's the same thing I would have done. I would have burned through my ketchup so quickly. The one thing I don't like about this movie is right before we went to air, I looked at this poster and the tagline, "Help is only 140 million miles away." Not a huge fan of that tagline. I like the simple "bring him home" better than that.
Okay. For me, there are some minor things, nothing major that ruins the film for me. I do think Sean Bean's character. So we talked about Jeff Daniels' character, how he wasn't a bad guy, right? But they almost tried to play Sean Bean against him, like, because there was a few lines he's like coward or da da da. And it's like we're watching and like, no, he's not a coward. He's just trying to do what he thinks is best for NASA in general or the people involved. And I thought maybe Sean Bean's character could have taken down a notch. And we all know he's a really good actor.
You know, for that is I see your point, but I think that it worked because of, again, going back to that tight-knit crew, and he's part of the crew. He managed the crew, so I did like that. I mean, it was a little over top. I think that where my criticism comes up, as much as I like Donald Glover, like that almost,
he was a little kooky.
It just almost seemed like a scene out of like I don't want to say Armageddon because that's a little bit too cheesy, but a different kind of movie. It just seemed for his character, and then there's that scene where he's showing them, and he has no regard. He doesn't know who Jeff Daniels is, and it's like it's to show like he's just a stoner type guy, and he's just like he's the unlikely guy. This is the only thing. It was small, and then I did feel the length a little bit, very little.
Did you drink a lot of water before you saw the
No,
movie?
I didn't have to pee. I just think there was a couple things maybe on Mars if they cut down a bit. You could have still told the same story and been fine, and maybe a little bit more development on some. Although this goes against my point of it being too long, but development a little bit more on some of the other crew. I know we got Summer Chastain, and you knew her because she was Jessica Chastain. You knew everything about the music, but I didn't know enough about her, Kate Mara, and I don't know enough about the history of Matt Damon. Like really, what his home like. Who was he at home? I think that in the trailer they showed something about him having like a family, but that they got rid of that.
See, that's the thing is I was going to talk about this. I think they kind of cheated twice in the trailer. One, they show that picture of the family. I have to look at it again, but I almost feel like that's actually Michael Pena's family, and they just made it look like his when he says family. The other part they cheated too was, he's making those video logs, right? And he has that one, surprise, I'm alive. They never saw that, but what they did in the trailer is they cut that video log and put it on the screen so that everyone saw it.
Yeah,
so I was okay.
All right, I did think of a couple things. Based on your guys' points, is that I thought Donald Glover and Kristen Wiig, where I thought they were good in the movie, but sometimes the comedians in a movie, it didn't mesh as perfectly as I've seen it done in other films. It took me out of the film just for a second. But after that, I did get into their characters, and I appreciated them in the story. I can't remember the young lady's name. She's a really good actress who's blonde. I
forgot her name as well, but she's on *Halt and Catch Fire*.
Yes, and I thought she was tremendous in this movie as well. On the length thing, this is one of those rare movies where I'm actually a little bummed that we didn't get a longer movie because I think it would have warranted that. Particularly, I like how the movie opened and that they rushed you into this disaster that happened. I could have used a little more backstory as to how they were working together. Give me some more depth on what their mission was and how the characters interacted, because at the end, the relationship between Kate Mara's character and the astronaut who she was apparently dating or hooking up with.
Sebastian Stan's character. I forgot the name of it.
I didn't need to see that in there. I was like, you've already done so much for me. It's almost like you're getting too many gifts for your birthday. It's like, no, guys, you did enough. Seriously. I didn't need to see that. Didn't hurt the movie for me, though.
Side note, how funny was the Project Elrond thing with Sean Bean?
Yeah.
The whole council.
Yeah, I love that.
And his explanation. One thing that did kind of, it didn't bother me as much, but I mean, you had Chiwetel Ejiofor, who's a fantastic actor, but he was cast as Vincent Kapoor, which is an Indian name. And I read that they originally wanted to cast this actor Irfan Khan, who's in the last Jurassic World. He played the billionaire.
Yeah, definitely.
He's been a few other things, and I guess he couldn't do it because of scheduling, so Chiwetel stepped in. They could have just changed his last name.
I mean, he's adopted.
Change his last name. It's not that hard. And his ethnicity didn't even really play that much into it, So that I was like, oh, okay. But as far as the movie goes, those are just minor little tiny things. For the most part, I loved it. One of my favorite movies. Let's give a score and your last ending thoughts, Mark.
I'm going to go 10 out of 10, man. This is everything I want to see when I go to the movies. And like Christian brought up earlier, this was the perfect meshing of Castaway and Apollo 13. Those are two of my favorite movies of all time. And I might like The Martian even better than that. You will not be disappointed when you go see this movie. If you're watching this vid, you already have. And I'm curious to know, you guys tell us in the comments, are you going back to see The Martian like I am this weekend? This is one of those movies I want to sit next to somebody who hasn't experienced it yet and just gauge their reaction, because it's just such a mind-blowing event film to me.
Christian?
I'm going 9 out of 10. You always get sad when you see one of your favorite directors kind of lose a step, but you get just as happy when you see them get that step back. And he has it. Ridley Scott, to have him come back to do this movie, to jump on later after Godard wasn't able to do it, and working with a great cast, a great script, the pacing, everything about this movie was what you want to see in the movies. The visuals, it actually, I thought, worked well with the 3D, worked well in IMAX. So I think that this one was an IMAX 3D, but I think that it's a movie, a breath of fresh air, honestly, in the October season, and it's a movie you should check out.
Okay, I'm kind of floating between 9 and 9.5. I'm going to give it a 9 for now. Maybe after I see it, I'm definitely going to see it a second time, maybe a third time, maybe after that, maybe the score will go up. Yeah, I liked it. Not only that, I like the messages in this movie, because it's a movie about kind of teamwork, problem solving, persistence. It's like you had the we didn't mention this before, but you had China coming in to help the US. It wasn't like you are the evil ones, Jeff Daniels is the evil guy, or anything like that. It was all about, how can we solve this problem? The problem of, let's go get this guy and bring him home. And everyone was on board. You had all this, and the thing about his isolation is how much human communication meant to him. Because remember when he first was able to talk to them using the camera movement, pointing at different
and finding
things.
that thing, by the way, too, was great. And going back to the emission from 98 or whatever it was, that I thought was brilliant as well too. And you're right. Like, once he's able to talk to them, and that look on his face, the pure joy, the happiness of finally talking to someone that he's not alone in the universe now. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, so I highly recommend this movie. I definitely am going to see it again. So thanks for joining us. Where can people find you, Christian?
You can find me, here on Movie Talk 2-3 times a week, as well as Collider Jedi Council Thursdays. Make sure that you're checking it out. It's everything Star Wars. I want you guys to do that. Hashtag Collider Jedi Council. And we actually just put up a Brady, if you want to know more about canon, the Star Wars canon, I just put up a video on Schmoes Know if you want to check that out.
And Mark?
Yeah, I'm going to be seeing The Martian and Van Halen this weekend, so it's going to be a pretty sweet 3 days for me. You can also find me. They let me occasionally pop into Movie Talk and Jedi Council, and online at 5150 Ellis on Twitter and Instagram.
And you guys can find me on Twitter at ThinkHero, on Instagram, Dennis.tzng. And just a reminder to subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/collidervideos. Also, tell us what you thought about The Martian. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Are you somewhere in between? You can post in your comments below, and we will see you guys next time.